Marky, Billson here. Steve Forbes will come up in just a few minutes. Talk a little bit about the disappointing loss to the Xavier Musketeers, but maybe also in defeat, I think possibly a victory, as our phone has just fallen down right there. And what I mean by that is I think that, it's not the same old ETSU where you'd lose by a point and you'd think that's fantastic to the number 10 team in the country. No. This is a very disappointing loss with 22 points up, choking it away. Musketeers score 7 straight times at one point late in the second half. This is a tough one. This is one the Bucs should have won, and if the Bucs did win it, it would have been a major development for not only the basketball program, but the Southern Conference at large. I still talk about the SoCon. I believe someday, I still do, it could be a 2-bid league. But if it's going to be that, you don't blow 22-point leads to Xavier on the road or at home. And I also said, it's the number 10 team in the country, Marky. I don't care. I remember when ETSU was the number 10 team in the country. To be honest with you, ETSU hasn't been nationally ranked in 26 years. I think instead of looking at that 91 season, 90-91, as an aberration, maybe, just maybe, we should look at it as something to be striven for again, and it's overdue for ETSU to have a national ranking, especially with the top 25. All right, I want to tell you, I don't have the tape on this. In fact, we're having a little bit of difficulty playing the tape. I say tape, the recordings. Listen to me, I'm living in what era? But I did have an interesting talk yesterday with Fred Warren. I had mentioned before earlier when Dr. Richard Sander was the AD, I had talked about, hey, what is the contract status of Fred Warren? Because in 2007, he had signed a 10-year contract. He told me he was on year-by-year extensions. Kind of interesting, too. He also told me he mentioned, without mentioning any names, that a previous administration he wasn't too keen on. Previous administration? And then he went on to praise the current one. I don't think he's talking about Randy Sander there, do you? And if that previous administration he wasn't so tremendously enthused about, when you had the revolving door of athletic directors from Shelton to Fry and even before that, Les Robinson, from Fry to Pergo Lizzie, from Pergo Lizzie to Stansberry, now at Georgia Tech, there was a rubbing of the chin. You would have thought, because Warren was there through all of that, you would have thought that he would have had the opportunity maybe to go somewhere else at that time, especially after leading ETSU to the number 3 ranking in the country back in 1996. Instead, and he had signed for 10 years, what administration do you think he was speaking of? Very interesting. When it seemed like, during the David Mullins era, there was a lot of pitting of one program against another. And I still think ETSU, and for that matter, the community at large, suffers from that era. Building softball fields before you built a new arena for the basketball program, moving into eventually a decrepit Freedom Hall and having to put good money after bad to make it a nice facility, but still a facility on a high school campus with nothing around it, smaller than it was before. That makes it easier to sell out. I do get that. But, when ETSU was number 10 in the country, they averaged 8,400 fans a game. They can't do that now. There's not enough space to seat 8,400 in Freedom Hall. Those days are gone unless a move back to the mini dome or the construction of a new arena is built. And that's what ETSU should have done. Imagine the concerts that would have come in, the minor pro sports that could have come in, indoor football as well as hockey. Freedom Hall isn't big enough. The space on the ground is not big enough for hockey. Neither is Viking Hall, neither is Buck Van House Dome. You can make ice. They've had ice capades there, but the arena is not big enough for hockey. And it's 200 feet long. You have to have the rink. But what would it mean for the Tri-Cities? I've always asked this, to have an ECHL team, whereas Roanoke, Asheville, and Knoxville did not. Put them a little higher on the map. And we would have, and I say we, yes, we were in the Tri-Cities here. I can say we this time. We'd have the NASCAR track to boot. Anyhow, that is one of the things we talk about. And it just, that Warren, and it seemed like during the Mullins era, the former tennis coach, those non-revenue sports were the ones that, were getting the benefit of the doubt at ETSU. Wouldn't a Florida-based conference, the Atlantic Sun, help out the golf program, the tennis program, etc.? You might think so. But yeah, and again, he didn't come out and say, Fred Warren, name anybody by name. But I became a much bigger Fred Warren fan after speaking with him not long ago, just yesterday, than I was before. And he also laughed when I said, I got to get on here on this show because it's like this. When you're ranked number 3 in the country, the problem with that is that we expect you to do it again. I'll be talking to Steve Forbes in a little bit, and I did think, that it was a symbolism of losing the way ETSU did to the number 10 team in the country. Like I said, I remember when ETSU was the number 10 team in the country. Why has it been 26 years? This may be the deepest ETSU team I can remember. Even back in the glory days. It was 5 1,000-point scorers. When they graduated, basically, ETSU fell, and they fell fast. It wasn't necessarily a deep team. I don't know if this team is talented, or as talented, but it's certainly deeper. Something to be said for that. So, you'd also think that such a deep team, you wouldn't blow such a big lead at halftime. All right, so we've talked about that. I do wonder, though. I want to go back to what I spoke of in our last minute here before we break and then go to talk to Steve Forbes. I do want to ask, are we, the only negative I can really see on Randy Sanders being hired right now is, are we living too much in the past? Are we living off of 98 Vols a little too much? That was 20 years ago. And ETSU is ETSU. It's not Tennessee. 98 Vols, you might as well be bringing in, I don't know, an assistant from, 2000 Oklahoma. From 99 Florida State. From 93 Florida State. I worked with Charlie Ward. You might as well be doing something like that to a certain extent. Might not be bad. They would have proven that they're a good coach by being a winner, certainly. But it is, yesterday's victory. Florida State was 6-6. This is the concern on a Randy Sanders hire. It's not a slam dunk. What hire is? It does, however, and I said this before on the hour, give ETSU a lot of prestige. People weren't talking about a Randy Sanders to be hired as the ETSU coach. Really? The resume ETSU just brought in, admittedly after a down season at Florida State, but what's the difference between bringing in the offensive coordinator, co-offensive coordinator, what have you, at Florida State, and the difference from the offensive coordinator at Penn State and Mississippi State did, or the defensive coordinator at Alabama that Tennessee did? Something to think about. We've got to think about how good the ETSU Buccaneers are. They're 6-4 this year, but could have very easily been 7-3 and maybe getting votes for the top 25 if they had just been able to hold on to a 22-point lead. I'll be talking to Steve Forbes about that. In the next hour, we'll continue talking a little on ETSU. I can take your calls at 423-743-6124, though not right now, but I can in the future. And We can talk a little bit about the NFL, a very controversial weekend in the NFL, but I think the wrong call is getting the attention. Tri-City Sports Now comes back. Steve Forbes after this.
Andy Irwin, 14-12.